You too. How you doing?
Hello everyone, this is Reverend Dr. Roger Paul, and tonight we're going to study paper 105, Deity and Reality. And that starts on page 1152.1. So we'll say a little prayer and we'll get started. Father, thank you for bringing us together tonight that we might study this wonderful revelation. Pray you open our hearts and minds tonight that we might understand some of this and share it with others and that they may learn also. We thank you and we give you the praise in your Son Jesus' name.
Amen.
All right, paper 105, Deity and Reality. To even high orders of universe intelligences, infinity is only partially comprehensible, and the finality of reality is only relatively understandable. The human mind, as it seeks to penetrate the eternity mystery of the origin and destiny of all that is called real, may helpfully approach the problem by conceiving eternity infinity as an almost endless, limitless eclipse. You getting feedback from something?
Yeah, I know.
Which is produced by one absolute cause, and which functions throughout the universal circles of endless diversification, ever seeking some absolute and infinite potential of destiny. I read that whole paragraph and I didn't understand a single word of it because I listened to the feedback.
Is anybody having,
I think it's Rodney, but I'm not sure. It's a little.
Rodney, could you mute your mic, please?
there's a problem with the audio.
Yeah, that
Yeah,
was,
big time.
he got it.
I can't hear you at all. I just heard Mildred right there, and all the rest of it's the mumble jumble.
Okay.
There's a lot of squeaky in Roger's video.
Maybe we
Audio.
should start over again.
Should we start over?
Yeah, let's do
Let me
that.
start the paragraph over again.
Okay.
Maybe we'll do better this time. To even high orders of universe intelligences, infinity is only partially comprehensible, and the finality of reality is only relatively understandable. The human mind, as it seeks to penetrate the eternity mystery of the origin and destiny of all that is called real, may helpfully approach the problem by conceiving eternity infinity as an almost limitless eclipse, which is produced by one absolute cause, and which functions throughout this universal circle of endless diversification, ever seeking some absolute and infinite potential of destiny. Okay, so what they're telling us here is even the high orders of beings only partially comprehend the concept of eternity, right? And that's because eternity is so vast. You know, only God the Father really understands no beginning and no end. The rest of us are all start at one point or another, so we have a starting point. And since we had a starting point, we think there's an ending point, right? And that's just part of being a human. And so part of the eternity equation in this, in the mystery of the origin and destiny of everything, what we call real is our perception of those things, which we can understand. And so since infinity is literally limitless, it's hard for us to consider infinity as a real thing, right? In which it is. All right? And when we talk about the potential of destiny, that which is to come and that which God has planned for us to come is a total mystery, really. We can learn about it, but it's still a mystery. Okay, remember this slide from last time? If I can get to move. You know, this is the whole concept of the I am, all the trinities, the triunities, everything which makes up God the I am, right? The third level of Trinity of Trinities. And we're going to take bits and pieces of this again tonight. Right? And you remember this chart from last time, the deity absolute, the universal absolute, and the unqualified absolute. You can download these slides and look at all of these again. We've gone over it about 3 times. But tonight we're going to go approach all 3 of these a little bit different because I have some slides that are kind of explanations of these. These are all the references in the Urantia book about these subjects. The next slide is going to take each one of these one at a time. Now this slide is not from the Urantia book. We've got 3 slides coming here that are not from the Urantia book. They're quotes from the Urantia book. Okay? So let's start out with the first one. Can you read this okay, Millie?
Yes.
Would you take the first one for us then?
Qualified absolute, revealed spiritual absolute. The deity absolute is that potential which was segregated from total, infinite reality by the free will choice of the universal Father, and within which all divinity activities, existential and experimental, shall take place. This is qualified absolute in contradistinction to the unqualified absolute, but the universal absolute is super addictive to both in the encompassment of all absolute potential.
Okay, so when we talk about the qualified absolute, it's also known as the revealed spiritual absolute, also the deity absolute. Okay, that's the first of the 3 absolutes. In the previous slide, it's the first line of information. Okay, and the deity absolute is everything having to do with the deity control of all reality. Okay, so when we talk about the qualified absolute or the deity absolute, then we're talking everything that deity qualifies or deity controls is involved with this particular absolute. Okay, and they're comparing it to the unqualified absolute, which is non-deified absolute, and the universal absolute, which is the non-deified absolute plus the deified absolute together. Okay, so let's move on to the next slide. I'm hoping this will make this even more, have more sense. Stephen, can you read that through the slides?
Okay. Unqualified absolute, unrevealed physical absolute. Unqualified absolute unifies with deity absolute and universal absolute. The unqualified absolute is non-personal, extra divine, and undefined, unified. The unqualified absolute is therefore devoid of personality, divinity, and all creator
Prerogatives.
prerogatives.
Right.
Neither fact nor truth, experience nor revelation, philosophy nor absolutity are able to penetrate the nature and character of this absolute without universe qualification. Let it be made clear that the unqualified absolute is a positive reality pervading the grand universe and, apparently, extending with equal space presence on out into the force, activities, and pre-material evolutions of the staggering stretches of the space regions beyond the 7 super-universes.
I'm glad that's clear.
Pardon?
I'm glad they made that clear.
Okay. The unqualified absolute is not a mere negativism or philosophic concept predicated on the assumptions of metaphysical sophistries concerning the universality, dominance, and primacy of the unconditioned and the unqualified. The unqualified absolute is a positive universe over control in infinity. This over control is space force unlimited, but is definitely conditioned by the presence of life, mind, spirit, and personality, and is further conditioned by the will, reactions, and purposeful mandates of the Paradise Trinity.
Okay, so what are they talking about, the unqualified absolute? They're talking about everything that is material, everything that makes up the universe in a physical matter sense, plus everything in the outer space levels. The unqualified absolute has to be in the outer space levels before any deity whatsoever or agents of the deities start to work with matter out in the four outer space levels. So the unqualified absolute basically is out there like an over-control of all physical matter, but it does not have personality. What gives it personality? The deity absolute, or the qualified absolute. You see where they come in together, they work together? And what brings them together is the universal absolute. And we're going to cover that next.
So, Roger, I've got a question.
Yeah, go right ahead.
Ultimatums make up everything physical.
Right.
So, this is in control of the ultimatum.
Yes, it is. And that's a good way to look at it, Rodney, because the automaton basically is moved and controlled by the unqualified absolute, which makes up matter, right? And where does the ultimatum come from? It comes from paradise. So we know the unqualified absolute stretches all the way back to paradise, right? Through all the 7 super universes and all the outer space levels. But anything that's material, the unqualified absolute has control over and movement of. Now, what else has control and movement of that? Paradise itself, right? Because paradise is where all material things come from. But it's the all unqualified absolute that prepares the way for paradise to manipulate that, right? Or move the gravity around that makes that happen. All right?
I was about to mention gravity.
Yeah. Gravity is a big part of it. All right, let's go on to the next one. Rodney, you want to take this one?
All right. You guys can hear me okay, huh?
Yeah.
A little pleasant.
It's sketchy, you know, but go ahead, I'll read along as you're going.
Okay, universal absolute. Associative resolving absolute. The universal absolute, we logically deduce, was inevitable when the universal follows absolute free will act of differentiating universal realities into deified
Deified and undeified.
and undeified, personalizable and non-personalizable beings. The universal absolute is the deity phenomenon indicated of the resolution of the tension created by the free will act of thus differentiating universality and functions as the associative coordinator of the sum totals of existential potentialities. The teaching presence of the universal absolute signifies the adjustment of differential between deity reality and undeified reality, inherent in the separation of the dynamics of free will divinity from the statics of unqualified infinity. Always remember, potential infinity is absolute and inseparable from eternity. Actual infinity in time can never be anything but partial and must therefore be non-absolute. Neither can infinity of actual personality be absolute except in unqualified deity. And it is the differential having the potential and the unqualified absolute and the deity absolute that eternalizes the universal absolute, thereby making it cosmically possible to have material universes in space, and spiritually possible to have finite personalities in time. The finite can coexist in the cosmos along with the infinite only because the associated presence of the universal absolute so perfectly equalizes the tensions between time and eternity, deity and infinity, reality, potential, and reality, actuality, paradise and space, man and God. Associatively, the universal absolute constitutes the identification of the zone of progressing evolution, reality existent in time and space, and then the transcendent time-space universes of sub-infinite deity manifestation.
Okay, so the universal absolute is the glue that brings it all together, right? The universal absolute brings infinity concepts and things, matter, things like that, together with the deity concepts, right? It also allows spiritual beings and finite beings to intertwine in this reality of things material and spiritual that goes out through all eternity. Okay? So the reason we can live in this universe that we have here is because of the universal absolute. It resolves the tension between that, all those things that are forever, and all those things that are temporary and growing into forever. Okay? So it's kind of like the check work or the glue that keeps the finite reality together with the infinite reality, right? So without it, we wouldn't even know we exist because we wouldn't have a concept of anything. Does that make a little more sense with those? I'm going to show you a little slide here because when I put these slides together, I took certain parts of it, and some of it I didn't put in because it just confused things when we talked about those certain things. But what I wanted to show you here is this destiny trinity here. You see this experiential destiny and absolutes? Right to the right and above it here, you see that the unqualified works with the nuclear isle of paradise. You see that there? Okay, and also, this is probably hard to read, but I'm going to read it to you. So space, rarefied paradise matter is pulled and stretched away by the unqualified absolute to the edge of the master universe. Okay, so it's the unqualified absolute that pulls the material from paradise out to make all the 7 super universes and all the outer space levels. Okay. The other thing I wanted to show you on this chart is right above it, and notice at the top it says time originates just above upper paradise. So upper paradise is where time originates, and why is that important? Because the 7 super universes are all time related. Okay? Paradise is not. Okay, there is no space and there is no time in paradise. Okay? Also, the physical gravity circuit actually originates in neither paradise, at the bottom of paradise. Energy returns to paradise, and space originates just below neither paradise or lower paradise. So, basically, it leaves paradise, goes on the circuit all the way around the 7 super universes, all the way around the 4 outer space level, and returns back in as a physical gravity circuit back into paradise. on the top. So it's like a big circle, right? And that's one of the reasons that time originates on top, because this movement of gravity and the movement of everything around paradise gives us basically what is considered time. The rotations of the 7 super universes alone and everything around paradise. That makes sense? Kind of.
Honestly.
I know y'all haven't seen that one before. All right. Diane?
When the mortal intellect attempts to grasp the concept of reality totality, such a finite mind is face to face with infinity and reality. Reality totality is infinity and therefore can never be fully comprehended by any mind that is infinite in concept capacity.
Since we have no reference points, we can't possibly understand infinity, right? Because we don't live there yet, right? The human mind can hardly form an adequate concept of eternity existences, and without such comprehension, it is impossible to portray even our concepts of reality totality. Nevertheless, we may attempt such a presentation, although we are fully aware that our concepts must be subjected to profound distortions in the process of translation modification to the comprehension level of the mortal mind. So it's trying to explain to an ant what's going on in our reality, right? So next to impossible. Lily, would you take the next one?
The mic is muted, Millie.
1. The philosophic concept of the I am. Absolute primal causation in infinity, the philosophers of the universes attribute to the universal Father functioning as the infinite, the eternal, and the absolute I am.
Okay, you know in the Old Testament when supposedly when Moses talked to God and his response was I am that I am, that comes from the teachings of the Galgaston 100 to the early Bedouins. But it's a true statement that when God says I am that I am, there's no explanation of who God is, because there is nothing in the universe that is likened to God the Father. You know, the eternal Son and infinite Spirit in the Trinity with the Father, but it's actually the Father is the origin of all 7 of the original absolutes, right? And I stuck this slide back in so y'all can look at this, but this original 7 absolutes are the Paradise Trinity, right? Paradise itself, and what is it? The qualified, the universal, and the unqualified absolute. The makeup of all of that comes from the I am, or God the Father. So he's the first source and center of everything, right? That's why they call him the first source and center. Stephen, would you like to take the next one, please?
Okay, I believe it's me, right?
Yeah, please.
Okay. There are many elements of danger attendant upon the presentation of the moral intellect of this idea of an infinite I am, since its concept is so remote from human experiential understanding as to involve serious distortion of meanings and misconceptions of values. Nevertheless, the philosophic concept of the I am does afford finite beings some basis for an attempted approach to the partial comprehension of absolute origins and infinite destinies. But in all our attempts to elucidate the genesis and fruition of reality, let it be made clear that this concept of the I am is in all personality meanings, and value, synonymous with the first person of deity, the universal Father of all personalities. But this postulate of the I Am is not so clearly identifiable in undefined realms and universal reality.
In the undeified realms, all right, what are we talking about? Those realms in the outer space levels. It's not so easy to identify the Father I Am in the makings of this primordial soup that makes up the super universes outside of the 7 super universes in the outer space levels. So this concept of the I Am, no matter how they try to explain it to us, it is not a good enough explanation of all the encompassment of God the Father. It's just not. There's no way to explain it to us because we don't have anything to relate to the things they try to tell us, right? So some things we just have to take on faith. All right. Rodney, would you take this one, please?
The I Am is the infinite. The I Am is also infinity. From a sequential time viewpoint, all reality has its origin in the infinite I Am, whose solitary existence and past infinite eternity must be a finite creature's premier philosophic postulate. The concept of the I Am connotes unqualified infinity, the undifferentiated reality of all that could ever be and all of an infinite eternity.
So it's all next to impossible for us to understand something that has no beginning and no end, right? Because we're a finite person. We start somewhere and we end somewhere when we die, right?
I was raised Catholic, and that was one thing that I used to ponder when I was sleeping, is, and it was always like I felt myself suspended in time, between the two. It was just like an existence that was no touching anything, no earth, no
Yeah.
sky, nothing, just you were there, and God was everywhere.
Yeah.
I used to think about it all the time. As an essential concept, the I Am is neither deified nor undeified, neither actual nor potential, neither personal nor impersonal, neither static nor dynamic. No qualification can be applied to the infinite except to state what the I Am is. The philosophical postulate of the I Am is one universe concept which is somewhat more difficult of comprehension than that of the unqualified absolute.
So we can try to explain the deity absolute and the unqualified absolute and the universal absolute, but that don't even come close to the I Am, even though it encompasses all those things, right? It's trying to analyze God in pieces, and you just can't do that. God just is, and that's what I say here. The I Am is, right? All right. And this is another slide. This is not in this series of slides. This is just a quote from the book about the unqualified absolute. The unqualified absolute, existential things simply are. Something that is existential, no beginning, no end, they just are. They have always have been and always will be. This is part of the unqualified absolute. The unqualified absolute is existential. A positive reality, an absolute potentiality. In other words, everything that could ever happen comes from the unqualified absolute. Devoid of personality, infinite capacity, I Am static, reactive. In other words, he reacts to the I Am. Limitless, timeless, spaceless, boundless. Measureless, truly infinite. Repository of static potentials. We're still talking about the unqualified absolute. Everything that could happen. Created created universes, revealer, regulatory, repository of all that paradise it as source, totality of non-personal, extra-divine, and undeified reality, unpredictable in reactions, unrevealed cosmic infinity of I am, an absolute of infinity. Emergent energy must be liberated from the unqualified absolute. Matter subject to cosmic overcontrol may be activated by second experiential trinity, and it's a member of the triodity of potentiality because all potentials comes from the unqualified absolute. Master force organizers manipulate primordial space forces of the unqualified absolute. So those beings that are out in the outer space levels get their materials from the unqualified absolute. And outer space is the main domain of the unqualified, right? All right. Now we're going to talk about how we think about as we are. And I've got a chart for this too. All right. Millie, would you take this one?
To the finite mind, there simply must be a beginning. And though there never was a real beginning to reality, still there are certain source relationships which reality manifests to infinity. The pre-reality primordial eternity situation may be thought of something like this. At some infinitely distant, hypothetical, past eternity moment, the I am may be conceived as both thing and no thing, as both cause and effect, as both volition and response. At this hypothetical eternity moment, there is no differentiation throughout all infinity. Infinity is filled by the infinite. The infinite encompasses infinity. This is the hypothetical static moment of eternity. Actuals are still contained within their potentials, and potentials have not yet appeared within the infinity of the I am. But even in this conjecture situation, we must assume the existence of the possibility of self-will.
Okay, so I wanted y'all to see sort of a picture of what they're talking about here.
I haven't a clue.
Okay. We're talking about a moment. This is how we conceive of things. You see, if you count by numbers, we look at numbers on a line, right? Numbers has a beginning point, and normally they have an ending point, okay? But you have to think of eternity as starting from a zero place, which is where we are, and going indefinitely. See this little 8 figure? That's infinity. And they go both backwards and forwards. Okay? So our concept of infinity is things that have to stack together. And what they're talking about in the past is some moment where there was nothing but the I am. Okay? And I am filled up all of eternity by himself. Okay? So that's a hard concept for us to think of. So you think of this one little section, or a beginning, okay? This one equals everywhere and everything, okay? So 1 equals God, okay? And in this time-space presence of that one section, that would be considered the infinite or full unlimited potential all the time, right? It's the infinite power of God, unlimited power of God that goes on indefinitely, right? So, the one is all powerful. When we add a finite being, one finite being, a starting point for the finite which is limited. And that's what that 0 and 1 represents. It's one section of time for the finite beings. Okay, very small. And so you can see why we have to progress from the finite to the Maracha, to the spiritual, to eventually until we stand before God Himself, and become a finality. So that's sort of a picture of where we are, right? And how God is infinite. Does that make any sense to you?
Yeah.
It's just an illustration to try to explain the concepts that are so difficult for us to understand.
I don't remember ever seeing this particular.
Well, I taught this once before when we had the 11-week course.
I know I was there, but I don't remember that.
You don't remember this one?
Not that.
I don't remember it either.
No?
I don't remember seeing this either.
No, you don't.
Hmm.
But believe it or not, I've taught it before. It's out in the old videos 6, 7 years ago. So.
Where was my mind?
Yeah. It's just hard to understand, so it wasn't surprising you didn't remember it. Okay. Stephen, would you take the next one, please? Hang on.
Right. Ever remember that man's comprehension of the universal Father is a personal experience. God as your spiritual Father is comprehensible to you and to all other mortals. But your experiential, worshipful concept of the universal Father must always be less than your philosophic postulate of the infinity of the first source and center. The I am, when we speak of the Father, we mean God as He is understandable by His creatures, both high and low, but there's much more of deity which is not comprehensible to universe creatures. God your Father and my Father is that phase of the infinite which we perceive in our personalities as an actual experiential reality. But the I am ever remains as our hypothesis of all that we feel is unknowable of the first source and center. And even that hypothesis probably falls far short of the unfathomed infinity of original reality.
So even our greatest hypothesis of God is not even close, right? And that's just the way it is. All right. Rodney, would you take the next one?
The universe of universes, with its innumerable host of inhabiting personalities, is a vast and complex organism, but the first source and center is infinitely more complex than the universes and personalities which have become real in response to his willful mandates. When we stand in awe of the magnitude of the master universe, as to consider that even this inconceivable creation can be no more than a partial revelation of the infinite.
So let's take a look at a picture of the partial revelation of the infinite. This is paradise, and this is the Havona rings, and these are the satellites around paradise, the 21 satellites, right? The dark gravity bodies, the two belts that surround Havona. This is what keeps us from being able to see Havona on telescopes. And then we have the 7 super universes. This is where we live, right? And then out past that are the 4 outer space levels. These out here are the areas of the unqualified absolute right now we've just been talking about, right? Even though it takes its material from paradise, it stretches it all the way out to the outer space levels. Now I got another picture of this that's actually a little better. The reason I put both of these in here is when you download the slides, you can study these at your leisure. But this one labels it really well. Paradise, the Havona, all 7 of the Havona circuits, the outer gravity belt, the inner gravity belt, the super universe level, where all 7 super universes are, and then the 4 outer space levels. I just thought that was a little bit better picture, so I included it also. And this is what they're talking about, is when we the magnitude of the master universe, that's what they're talking about. It's so huge we can't even conceive of it, right? Makes up of everything that is. All right, Kevin, you take this one?
Infinity is indeed remote from the experience level of mortal comprehension. But even in this age on Urantia, your concepts of infinity are growing, and they will continue to grow throughout your endless careers, stretching onward into future eternity. Unqualified infinity is meaningless to the finite creature, but infinity is capable of self-limitation and is susceptible of reality expression to all levels of universe existences. And the face which the infinite turns towards all universe personalities is the face of the Father, the universal Father of love.
What it all boils down to is that he's the Father of love of all creatures, right? All right. You know, something I want to say before we move on to the next section is because of our human emotions and the way we relate to each other and we relate emotional to everything, we forget the unbelievable grandness of God the Father's love and unbelievable expansion of his love throughout all 7 super universes and even to the outer space level. It's pretty amazing. All right. Number 2, the I am as triune and as sevenfold. In considering the genesis of reality, ever bear in mind that all absolute reality is from eternity and is without beginning of existence. That's a concept in itself. By absolute reality, we refer to the 3 existential persons of deity, the Isle of Paradise, and the 3 absolutes. These 7 realities are coordinately eternal, notwithstanding that we resort to time-space language in presenting their sequential origins to human beings. So these 7 absolutes that we've talked about before are existential. They always have been, they always will be. There never was a time in all the universes where these 7 absolutes did not function. And that's hard for us to conceive of. Right? Let's skip through. There we go. Millie, would you take the next one?
In the following chronological portrayal of the origins of reality, there must be a postulated theoretical moment of first volitional expression and first repercussional reaction within the I am. In our attempts to portray the genesis and generation of reality, this stage may be conceived as the self-differentiation of the infinite one from infinitude. But postulation of this dual relationship must always be expanded to a triune conception by the recognition of the eternal continuum of the infinity, the I am.
Okay, so what they're saying is, there we go. What they're saying is this concept of the Trinity assumes that the universal Father had a first thought. Okay? And that first thought was his expression of the self-differentiation of himself to create the eternal Son. And together, their self-differentiation creates paradise and then the conjoint actor and Havona at the same time. Now, they say this in a sequential order, right? In other words, originally there was just the I am. But in reality, what they're telling us, there never was a time when the Father and the Son and the conjoint actor and paradise and Havona was not in existence, as far as they know. Which is way beyond our comprehension.
Okay, then, so what we're saying here is the Father and the Son are basically the same. They have the same principles and the same ideals. It's not like the Bible teaches the Father is some mean guy and the Son is some nice guy.
Right.
The Father and the Son are absolutely identical.
Yeah, it's a split of himself, basically.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there is no anger and hate and human emotions within God the Father.
Okay.
The only human type emotion within God the Father is love, and with the Son, mercy. Okay? And that's the only difference between the two. The Son is the champion of mercy for all the spiritual beings and all the children. The Father is the champion of love and caring and everything you can imagine for all his children himself. Right? The conjoint actor is the support for these two in every fashionable way you can think of. So that's why all the support personnel, including all the angels and all those type of beings, comes from the conjoint actor, right? And there's a reason they call this original Son the mother Son, because the original Son is the mother of all finite, above finite spiritual, all the beings of the universe, with the exception of the support personnel, which he is the mother in conjunction with the conjoint actor. So you really could call the Son the mother spirit of the universe, and the conjoint actor the co-mother spirit of the universe. You should think of that.
Well, in paper 6, that's exactly what they say.
Yeah.
But they don't have it on these charts.
No, they don't have it on these charts in this way because it's hard enough to explain that he's the Son, much less the
You have
mother's
to- Your
Son.
brain has to expand and blow up.
Yeah, yeah. Just getting this concept within itself for the Trinity is hard enough for people because what was the problem? Remember in the paper we talked about a couple of weeks ago where the Bedouins and the early man had a trouble with anything that was considered a Trinity because they had been inundated with all these multiple gods. India's still that way, right? Every kind of god you can think of. So when basically Moses tried to teach them about God the Father, they got this concept of a single, powerful, one God. And when you try to explain the Trinity to them, you lost them, right? You totally lost them because then they were going back to what? The concepts of multiple gods. And they wouldn't accept that, okay? So that's why the Jewish culture, all the way down through Jesus, had a real hard time understanding the Trinity within itself. So, let's move on. Let's see. Rodney, I think you're up.
Okay, this self-metamorphosis of the I Am culminates in a multiple differentiation of deified reality and an undeified reality, a potential and actual reality. There are certain other realities that can rarely be so classified. These differentiations of the theoretical monistic I Am are eternally integrated by simultaneous relationships arising within the same I Am. The pre-potential, pre-actual, pre-personal, monothetic pre-reality, which, the ultimate, is revealed as absolute in the presence of the first source and center, and has personality in the limitless love of the universal Father.
So what they're telling us, even the other absolutes, the deity absolute, the undeified absolute, and the universal absolute, even in these, you cannot separate those from God the Father because they are, in essence, living within the purview of the I Am or God the Father. Right? So you can't separate them. So this is just a way for us to understand how things work. Right? Better than anything else. And it's very complicated and hard to understand. I don't care what anybody says. So, all right.
By these internal metamorphoses, the I Am is establishing the basis for a sevenfold self-relationship. The philosophic time concept of solitary I Am and the transitional time concept of the I Am as a triune can now be enlarged to encompass the I Am as sevenfold. This sevenfold or seven-phase nature may be best suggested in relation to the seven absolutes of infinity.
Okay. So even though God the Father and God the Son and God the Spirit make up the Trinity, they still have the same basis as the I Am, right? And the other three absolutes and paradise have the same basis as the same I Am. You can't separate the I Am from any of them, right? Right? And they're going to talk about each one of these in particular.
So aren't they referring to the sevenfold?
Pardon me,
Would you repeat that, Ron?
Rodney?
What we just read, the last sentence,
Uh-huh.
they were referring to the sevenfold.
Correct.
Yeah,
About, the absolutes and Father, Son, and Spirit in paradise, right?
right. Father, Son, and Spirit in paradise. Paradise and the three absolutes. They're not talking about, all right, we're going to go over another sevenfold later in this paper, and I'm not even going to mention it because I don't want to confuse you. That's not the same sevenfold. The other sevenfold includes the paradise creator sons, etc., and we're going to go over that in a minute. Okay? All right, that's the expression of the sevenfold. All right, the first one. I'm up. You or you?
I just finished.
Okay. The universal Father. I am Father of the eternal Son. This is the primal personality relationship of actualities. The absolute personality of the Son makes absolute the fact of God's fatherhood and establishes the potential sonship of all personalities. This relationship establishes the personality of the infinite and consummates its spiritual revelation in the personality of the original Son. This phase of the I Am is partially experienceable on spirit levels even by mortals who, while yet in the flesh may worship our Father. Okay? And when you think about this in this way, you see how ridiculous it is to assume that Jesus, a creator son, was the original Son. Okay? The original Son is totally different. And it's going to go over that in a minute, too. All right. Millie.
Yes. The universal controller. Number 2. I am cause of eternal paradise. This is the primal, impersonal relationship of actualities, the original non-personal association. The universal Father is God as love. The universal controller is God as pattern. This relationship establishes the potential form, configuration, and determines the master pattern of impersonal and non-spiritual relationship, the master pattern from which all copies are made.
So paradise is a non-personal entity. You see that? It's a material entity. It encompasses God the Father, but paradise is the circuit which is the universal controller of near all matter, right? The gravity circuits, everything, right? But it's a non-personal entity. It's not a personal being, right? So this is a slide of that, okay? You have the Father, Son, which creates the conjoint actor, and at the same time creates paradise, which is non-deity. Now, paradise is the power pattern of all matter. Okay, so they call this the power pattern triunity. Why? Because you have the Father and Son and conjoint actor, which creates an effect on non-deity on paradise itself. In other words, the reason this came to being was because of these three relationships. Okay? All right. Stephen, would you take the next one?
Okay, 3, the universal creator. I am one with the eternal Son. This union of the Father and the Son in the presence of paradise initiate the creative cycle, which is consummated in the appearance of conjoint personality and the eternal universe. From the finite mortal's viewpoint, reality has its true beginnings with the eternal appearance of the Havana creation. This creative act of deity is by and through the God of action, who is in essence the unity of the Father, Son, manifested on and to all levels of the actual. Therefore is divine creativity unfailingly characterized by unity, and this unity is the outward reflection of the absolute oneness of the duality of the Father, Son, and of the Trinity of the Father, Son, Spirit.
Okay, so when the Father, the Son, and the Spirit comes together, the Spirit is the God of action, right? Automatically, the appearance of Havana comes into existence. Havana is the 7 rings around paradise, right? Perfected rings, with 1 billion worlds. All right? So, because of the coming together of God the Father, and God the Son, and God the Spirit, paradise is created and Havana is created. Make sense? So all reality is created because of this coming together. So because of this coming together, we end up with paradise and the 7 rings of Havana, right? Plus all the satellites around paradise. All these are created at exactly the same time.
So basically, they've always existed, but the 7 super universes have not.
That's right. That's right. These are existential. The 7 super universes are not. They had a beginning. The 7 super universes are the product of whom? The Creator Sons and the local universe Mother Spirits. Right? So this is the pattern right here. Right? This is the pattern for each of these 7 super universes. You got it? That's why they call it the pattern. Alright? Right, it's pretty good explanation here. The 7 evolving universes in association within the central divine universe we commonly refer to as the grand universe. These are now organized and inhabited creations. They are all part of the master universe, which also embraces the uninhabited but mobilizing universes of outer space. Okay? Rodney, would you take the next one?
Yes, third, the infinite appender. I am self-associative. This is the primordial association of the statics and potentials of reality. In this relationship, all qualifieds and unqualifieds are compensated. This phase of the I am is best understood as the universal absolute, the unifier of the deity and the unqualified absolutes.
So is this coming together for y'all now? See, this is the universal absolute is one of the 7 absolutes, right? And this, I put again in this, right after this, the information from the universal absolute from the chart of the 3 ones. Okay, so you can read these individually as you'd like to. All right, I don't see any reason to go back over these. The other thing it talks about here is the pervaded and unpervaded state. And this is a nice slide of that. It shows the space respiration, which is in a billion-year cycle. It goes out a billion years, then it comes back in a billion years. But you'll notice here, if you look real close, right in the center is paradise, right? And surrounding paradise, all the way around it, on both of these, is what they call pervaded space. This is all space we know of. This is where all the universes are. This is where all the outer space levels are. Everything is in this pervaded space. But there's also above and below paradise what they call unpervaded space. It's a nothingness. There's nothing out there.
Would that be the unqualified absolute then?
That would be part of the unqualified absolute. But this unpervaded space is necessary for the space respiration of the universe, okay? Because it's got to have some place to expand and contract to. So that's why you have this unpervaded space on top and bottom of paradise. Make sense?
Roger,
Yeah.
the book doesn't give us any indication as to what is outside the edge, does it?
Outside the edge of what? The 4th outer space level?
Yeah, outside the edge of reality.
No, it doesn't. And, you know, I've always said, and the book says it in one place, it's not a bad speculation to think that since there's 7 super universes, there's 7 rings of Havana, and there's 7 super universes, there's only 4 outer space levels. So it would probably be correct to assume that before God gets done with this master plan, that there'll probably be 7 outer space levels. You know?
I would think so, yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's lots of room for growth over billions and billions and billions and probably billions of years.
And then beyond.
Yeah. All right.
5, the infinite potential. I am self-qualified. This is the infinity benchmark bearing eternal witness to the volitional self-limitation of the I am, by virtue of which there was achieved threefold self-expression and self-revelation. This phase of the I am is usually understood as the deity absolute.
Okay, so this is the deity part of the 3 absolutes, right? And this is just the self-expression of the I am itself, is the deity absolute. And we have the slide on that right after that for your convenience too, okay? You don't have to keep looking back at the slides to find it. All right. 6, the infinite capacity. The I am self-reactive. Static reactive. This is the endless matrix of possibility for all future cosmic expansion. This phase of the I am is perhaps best conceived as the supergravity presence of the unqualified absolute, the non-deity part, right? And it's this unqualified absolute that expands out into the outer space levels. And you know, when we were talking about speculation for 7 of these outer space levels, it will be the outer unqualified absolute that will expand out into this, taking with him the master force organizers, right? And just multiplying even more. And then again, I put the unqualified absolute slide in there for y'all to you read down. And I hope this helps. Millie, would you take the next one, please?
Yes. 7. Universal one of infinity. I am as I am. This is the status of self or self-relationship of infinity, eternal fact of infinity reality, and the universal truth of reality infinity. Insofar as this relationship is discernible as personality, it is revealed to the universe as the divine Father of all personality, even of absolute personality. Insofar as this relationship is impersonally expressible, it is contacted by the universe as the absolute coherence of pure energy and of pure spirit in the presence of the universal Father. Insofar as this relationship is conceivable as an absolute, it is revealed in the primacy of the first source and center. In him, we all live and move and have our being, from the creatures of space to the citizens of paradise, and this is just as true of the master universe as of the infinitesimal ultimatum, just as true of what is to be as that which is and of what has been.
Okay, so this universal absolute is the relationship of the deity and the unqualified together as the I am. Now, y'all, this presentation has 99 slides, and we're at 43 right now. The next one will be 44. This is a lot of information and very heavy subject, and I don't want to blow y'all away and so you don't learn anything. So I think I'm going to stop here and take this up next week here, and that'll kind of divide up this break in the middle. Is that okay with y'all? Yeah? Now that way y'all can contemplate what we've gone over to now, and then when we go back into it next week, we'll go into the 7 absolutes of infinity, and it doesn't get any lighter. So, so I'll give y'all a little time to digest that, and then we'll go from here and go to the next one. And this is sort of the way I prepared this lesson. I took half of it at a time because it is just so much for anyone to even comprehend to do the whole thing together. So let's have a little prayer, and we'll end for today, and we'll come back and take this up again at this place next week. Millie, would you like to close us tonight?
Not tonight.
Not tonight? All right. How about you, Stephen? Would you like to close us in prayer?
No, thank you.
No?
Okay, well.
Okay, Diane.
Dear sweet Father, Mother God, oh, thank you so much for this opportunity to learn this, to review it, and to ponder it in our daily lives. We thank you for this revelation that it enhances our ability to somewhat comprehend the vastness of the universe and the universes and the whole essence of I am. We are so grateful for Roger studying this with such depth and comprehending it and making it more understandable for us to perceive it and to ponder it, and so that we also may learn what we learn, pass it on to others, and that others grow exponentially as we are in these classes. We thank you for each other, and thank you for the time that we spend together. We cherish it. It is in your name, Jesus Christ, my beloved, that we give thanks and praise. Amen.
Amen. And thank you at home for joining us. Please come see us again. You can find these online on our website or Vimeo.